Good day, everyone. Today I'm talking to Wisam Costandi, who's the founder and MD of Informatica Qatar. Good day, Wisam. How are you?
Hi, doing well, thank you.
Thank you, Wisam, and thank you, Wisam, for giving us your time.
No, it's a pleasure for me. I really like working with entrepreneurs and people who are interested in the entrepreneurial journey. So it's fun. Nice break from my day.
Good on you, Wisam. And Wisam, are you happy for me to go into our first question?
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you. Wisam, can you please share a little about yourself, the place you were born, your education, your passion, the things that you enjoy doing, and one thing that the public might not know about you?
Sure. So I'm from Lebanon. I was born in Beirut. I never lived there. We left quite young when the war started. After that, I lived in Saudi Arabia for a bit. Then I was in Europe for a while, in Switzerland. Ultimately, I moved to the US, where I did undergraduate and graduate degree, and where I worked there as well, before coming out here to start Informatica Qatar. I started IQ in something IT and technology infrastructure, obviously, which we can talk about. But what a lot of people don't know about me is that actually my education is completely different. I did my undergrad and graduate degree in biomedical engineering, which is still engineering, but a completely different path. Unfortunately, I never worked. I worked a bit in consulting in that field, but I've always been in IT and high tech most of my career.
Excellent. Wisam, thank you so much for sharing that. And interesting, like you said, biomedical engineering, because my sister is also a biomedical engineer and she's currently in Sydney. And then, you're transforming from that background to an IT, industry. That's very interesting and encouraging. And I'm sure we'll touch on those, on that journey moving forward. So moving on to our next question, Wisam, can you please share about your work experiences before you started Informatica Qatar? And what lessons have you brought forth from your previous work experiences into IQ?
After university, I worked with a small ISP, internet service provider, which was popular before, but we see less and less of them these days. And that's where I first started with IT, actually. I was working in as support. So I was working crazy hours. Actually, it was my brother had started the company and I went to join him. And I was working from, I think my schedule, I was doing all support. So I was working from midnight till 3 in the afternoon, 15-hour shifts, 7 days a week. So I didn't have any weekends. I did that for about a year before I got back to a more regular schedule. My takeaway from that, you learn a lot dealing with people. You learn patience because you're dealing with a lot of people that don't understand computers and how to work with them. So you have to be very, very patient. But other thing I learned is, sometimes you might not know what you want in life. Sometimes you can figure out what you don't want, and working those hours is something I never wanted to do again. Then after that was in Florida. Then we moved to California, Davis, near Sacramento, where I went in. I'd been working computers beforehand. I was fed up. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I decided to go back to biomedical engineering because computers were not the future, I thought. And I was pretty fed up. So I entered to do a graduate degree. I was thinking PhD, but ultimately I did master's. But when I was stuck in the lab all day, I realized I can't see myself doing this. So at the same time, I did my MBA. So I graduated with a master's in biomedical engineering and an MBA. Then I joined management consulting. I worked for Deloitte Consulting. That's a great experience. And I recommend people always to work in a big, successful company. Always say, I want to be on my own, and etc. Sure, you want to be on your own, but there's a lot to learn before you go out on your own. So even a short stint in a large, successful company, you learn a lot about how processes work, what makes them successful, and so forth. It's very, very important to your add to your skill set. After that, I went and I tried to do something on my own. Partners, it was a very bad experience. We had a big falling out. Then I joined another startup in San Francisco, which was, I had a good time there. It was a small 12-person company. It was nice, dynamic. You feel really important because what you do affects the company. You have direct impact on the company. Then I came to Qatar after that. that's where the real fun starts.
Excellent, Wisam. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it just shows, like, the different experiences you had before you came to Qatar. You know what I mean? Being part of startups, also going through that process of actually falling out with, I believe you mentioned co-founder, because I guess, like, that also probably would have made you realize the importance of, working with people whom you can trust and, see a common vision with. So very interesting. And thank you so much, Wissam, for sharing that. And moving on to our next question, can you please tell me, when did you start IQ and what was the inspiration behind this entrepreneurial venture?
So an old family friend reached out to me. He's from Qatar, and he said, let's do something in Qatar. It's a good opportunity in technology and so forth. So we came out here to visit the country in 2007. And in 2008, we decided, my wife and I said, okay, let's bite the bullet and go. We were relatively young, had one kid at the time, and it seemed like a good chance to, jump off the deep end. I came here with a general idea of what I wanted to do, which was IT services in that domain, but I didn't know the market very well. So I guess another one lesson I would tell people is, work with a big company, but understand the geography well before going. So I wish I'd worked in a big company here a couple of years to understand the lay of the land, but I didn't. So I had to learn everything up, and you learn in the end. It's just expensive. So when I came out here, we had a house in California, and a nice house, etc. And sold it because I needed to put the money into here to get the company off the ground. But once you sell the house, there is no plan B. So I think that's another important part. I think if we had kept the house, rented it, I don't think I would have survived here. I think I would have said, forget this, shut down and went back, take the easy road. Fortunately or unfortunately, there was a downturn in the US as well. So we sold the house at the right time before the big crash happened. So the inspiration for this entrepreneurial venture was just a family friend saying, let's go do it. And that's where the question of trust you mentioned earlier plays an important role. As important what you do is who you do it with.
Excellent, Wissam. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, that part of the story where you said, like, you actually sold your house in the US to, facilitate this new venture that you're starting in Qatar. When you think about it, when people look at the stories of successful business people, sometimes they don't realize the sacrifice that people have gone through, in starting their business, the crucial decisions that they have made, in facilitating that process. And I think when people do realize that part of the story, they tend to appreciate more.
Well, I don't think, I don't think people know how much they're willing to give up. People say, I'll do whatever. Like, I get approached by startups for funding, to support them, etc. And one of the key questions from any investor is, well, are you 100% full-time? And they say, no, but when we get the money, we'll be full-time. Well, it's not a chicken and egg thing. It's pretty straightforward. If you're committed, you'd quit now, use all your savings to get a prototype out or to get traction. Then, only then can someone trust you with their money to invest in you. How badly do you want it? I think it's a very, very important point that a lot of founders don't understand. Because if you have a job, and then you get money, then you quit. Well, if times get tough, you just, you go back to your job. And so it's important for an entrepreneur to, which is fine, but you just need to understand sort of your risk, what your appetite is for risk. And, having the skills to do something, it's pretty easy, actually. Skills, anyone can learn skills. Anyone can go out in the market and be able to learn skills. And hard work. We all work hard, right? And no one's afraid to put in 12 hours. But the big difference is your emotional resilience. I think for me, the biggest challenge is how emotionally strong are you? Because when you're on your own, the highs are great and you have good news. I mean, you're just cloud nine. But the lows are very, very low. And so it's this roller coaster you go through. And as you become more maturity as an entrepreneur, you're able to flatten it out. So instead of having highs and lows, you can start to manage them. Whereas a piece of bad news might crush you, for weeks and you can't get out of bed. A piece of bad news now I'd be like, okay, dust yourself off and let's mourn a bit, but let's move on. So how much you're willing to give up is a key indicator to, I believe, of how successful you are. There's nobody out there that's, been successful without a lot of sacrifice. Sure, on the media, you hear about the big, IPOs, blah, blah, blah. Well, you have better chance of winning 5 lotteries in a row than hitting a jackpot like those people do. Stories, the old days of MySpace, how the guy just, put it together and got successful and great. That very rarely happens. That's why it's on the news. 99.9999% of entrepreneurs are people getting up every morning, working hard, suffering, not sleeping because of payroll. And I think it's important that entrepreneurs understand that this is a shared journey, a shared experience, and they're all going through the same thing at one point or another.
Excellent point, Wisam. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Wisam, moving on to our next question, could you please share some insights into IQ's business model, or what is IQ offering the Qatari market?
So we are basically an ELV system integrator. So at a hardware technology company, when I say ELV, it means extra low voltage. So when you have a construction project, we're the ones putting in, the network for your internet. We're the ones putting in the security cameras. We're the ones putting in the building management system. We're the ones, we work with the fire alarm system, the AV, the audio, the speakers. All that is what we do. So we follow very close to the construction industry. There's a construction boom in Qatar. Now we got FIFA coming here in a couple of years. So there's a big construction boom happening, and we're able to follow that trend. However, at heart, we are a technology company. So we do work on technologies on our projects that we spin off into entities within Qatar or outside of Qatar as well. So Qatar is a small country with this vicious, very big project. So as an entrepreneur, it's a great place to springboard to anywhere in the world. And that's what I tell a lot of entrepreneurs here, that to think beyond the region. We have one of the best airports in the world. We got the best stadiums in the world. We have the best this, the best that. Well, we've worked on the airport extensively here. Well, guess what? From day one, if I want to go anywhere in the world, we have a reference, which is the number 1, number 5, or 4 in the world now, depending on what you're looking at, as a reference. And same with the stadium, same with this. And the government will support you. They have incentives. They want to promote it. They want to help local companies expand globally. There's a lot to do here. And since it's a small geography here with this relatively small population, there's a lot of diversification that has to happen in order to really increase your revenue. So, okay, we're doing construction now because it's happening, but you'll notice a lot of the larger groups, the larger companies, they do everything from jewelry, car rental, to construction, to manpower supply, to travel agency. You think anywhere else, you might think it's crazy, but here, because it's a small population, this is how they diversify their revenue streams.
Excellent, Wisam. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Wisam, moving on to our next question. So, does IQ have any competitors in the Qatari market? If no, which is great. If yes, how is IQ different to its competitors?
Well, we try and differentiate. So first, yes, we have competitors. I wish we didn't, but we do. We try and differentiate ourselves by providing sort of a different level of quality and expertise. We try and target the larger projects where there is a lot of integration that's required. So whereas a few years ago, you'd have global players coming in because the expertise wasn't local. So, 10 years ago, you'd have these big names from around the world, international multinationals coming in to do the work that we're doing, and they were subcontracted out. Now we're able to do that work of the large players, which is the big shift that's happened here. There's been an increase in knowledge here about executing these larger scale projects. That's like how we position ourselves. Fortunately, the market is crowded with what we do, so we've been able to build a sort of a name and reputation over the past several years that allows us to differentiate ourselves with the quality of our product. But it is becoming more and more of a commodity, unfortunately, which is why we have to keep diversifying inside or outside of Qatar.
Excellent, excellent, Wissam. And I think, one thing that you said, especially in a crowded market, I mean, dynamics can be different in different markets, but I think one thing that you shared was like being consistent, in your offerings, trying to build a name for yourself in the market. And I think that makes you stand out as well, isn't it? Because everyone knows you, everyone knows the quality of your work. You're a company that can be trusted. Once that goes out into the market, then that opens doors, isn't it? Is that something that you've seen in Qatar?
Yeah, definitely. So it's very much relationship based here. So they know that we're honest and straightforward in our business. So people appreciate that. But definitely name recognition is important. But ultimately, like anywhere in the world, price is the most important thing. So you have to be able to price, to compete on the good value for money on what you're delivering. You can't complain and say, yeah, but we'd offer a better product. Okay, but the client doesn't want a better product. They want have this budget for this. So if they have a budget for this type of work for Toyota, and you're offering a Mercedes, well, they're the wrong client. So in the end, anywhere in the world, price is still the most important thing for businesses. As a business, if you're offering something, either you want to improve their revenue or decrease their expenses. If it's a project, obviously you want to decrease their expenses. So brand is important. Only takes you so far.
Excellent, Wissam. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just to elaborate a bit more on that, so I'm a firm believer, as I'm moving through this entrepreneurial journey, I think personally that it's also important to choose your customers, you know what I mean? Because sometimes some customers are good to deal with, they give you good business and they comes also referrals along the way. And you earn a reasonable amount of profits on the projects you do. Do you think that is the case in Qatar, that you have the option actually to choose your customers, or you think that there's so much of competition that I need to go for the lowest price and then get that project? So what is kind of your strategy in that space?
So definitely, as a rule of thumb, getting additional business with current customers is 10 times easier than getting business with new customers. So for sure, you want to continue business with current customers. If you have the luxury to be selective, then definitely you can be selective. But in our business, there's a lot of work that goes into pricing a project. It's not, we're not selling a product where it's just off the shelf. A lot of work that goes into it. So we do have to be selective in the pricing of the project and who we work with. Of course, now there's other issues that come into account about payment terms, how financially strong is the customer, will they pay on time, will they go bankrupt halfway through the project, and those kind of questions. So it's definitely, we have clients we definitely prefer, and then clients who we haven't worked with, the clients, we don't want to work with. They say you can still fire the customer. I mean, we don't want to get to a point to fire the customer. We would just not rather engage with them to avoid that.
Excellent, Wisam. Thank you so much for sharing that. And moving on to our next question, or it's probably sharing from my end. So it's very interesting to know that you have worked on the new Doha International Airport project, because I was actually part of that project in its initial stages, the fuel hydrant system with a business or with a company. Also very interesting to know that, IQ is actually part of the Qatari Olympic Committee project, you know what I mean? So you have elements of that project you're executing currently, I believe. So it must have been proud moments for you, I would think, with the projects that IQ was getting. So looking back, Wissam, to May 2008, when you decided to start IQ, what do you think were the crucial or important decisions you took that laid a strong foundation for IQ's success in the Qatari market?
I think I talked about emotional resilience before, and related to that, I think the most important quality is persistence. That is the only differentiator, in my opinion, of a successful and unsuccessful business or person. So, I mean, you've spoken to a lot of people, Tony. I mean, there's a lot of dumb people who are successful. So you don't have to be smart to be successful. A lot of ugly people who are successful. You don't have to be handsome to be successful. But the only persistent thing amongst all these people is persistence. That's the common denominator across all of them. So why this is important, and you always keep hearing these motivational quotes, don't give up, blah, 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 is because it's true. I mean, when you're, if you consider yourself successful, it's not like, oh, I'm successful. The line isn't like that. Usually it's very, very hard work. And then something good happens and you take a step up. And it's more hard work, something good, then a step up happens like that. So for us, we were struggling. I mean, we're struggling in the sense that trying to get good projects and so forth. And then we got, for example, the new airport, Hamad Airport. We had to take a jump up. Then we work, and then we started getting stadiums. So we work at 3 FIFA stadiums. We take another jump up. Now we have more work. So that's usually the trend, I guess, in work and in life. It's a lot of day-to-day stuff happening with the occasional jump. It's just important to take a step back and just appreciate where you've come, or when something good happens, to appreciate it, to make a point of it, or else you're gonna keep beating yourself up without appreciating what you've done. Usually, as humans, we're harder on ourselves than anyone. So I think one of the important things is persistence. And it's not a quality I'm born with. I'm Gemini, so I like to change very often. But the fact that persistence is an important factor in how far we've come. And I say that I'm not born with it because it's like a muscle, like any other muscle that you have to train. It's not like any successful person or you read about in the news. I think it's important to remember that they're just people like you and me. And they're not superior in any other way, but maybe they're willing to take a risk. Or maybe they're a little bit more persistent, or maybe they just got a little lucky. They started an e-commerce company just at the right time, or a social media company just at the right time, and it was a little better. So there's a lot of other factors, but if they hadn't done that, they wouldn't have been successful.
Excellent, Wisam. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's very encouraging, and it's good to know that this emotional resilience, or persistence, basically is a muscle that we can actually, exercise and build on. So probably, people go through different struggles. And I think, sometimes I think, I could be wrong on this, but there's a lot of factors that builds a person, you know what I mean? And you talked about emotional resilience, you talked about persistence, and you said you're not born with it. But how do you think this has just come about in your life? So do you think that, was there an example for you that you actually looked up to, that inspired you to actually be resilient and be persistent?
Yeah, I have a story. It's a little cheesy. But when we moved, so I moved to Doha first. My wife was pregnant, and then she followed me after she gave birth, and I came, and then we came together here after I flew back. And we came, and my daughter had been born, and she came. My daughter was 3 months old. So a few months later, maybe more, my daughter must have been 6 months old, and she couldn't crawl yet. So she was, how babies they drag themselves before they crawl. Or maybe she was younger. I don't remember. But I remember she couldn't crawl yet. And then I was, going through such a hard time at work, and I was new, and I don't know what the heck I was doing. It's totally normal. If you don't know what you're doing, it's totally normal. It's fine. And I was in the living room, so I was in the dining area, and then in the living area, there's a step. It's just one step. So I was on the computer, the dining table, and I usually kept my daughter who couldn't crawl, she just dragged on the living room area, and there's a step, so she can't get up. So she keeps, whining, but it's safe because I know that area is safe and I'm working, and because she can go on top of the step. And then one evening I looked down and she made it on top of the step. So after weeks of trying, she finally did it. And that was a sort of a emotional moment for me, in the sense that you look at kids, how they just keep trying and trying, and then they can do things. She made up that step after weeks of trying. Then kids, they crawl, then they walk. They just keep trying and falling, and they don't even think about, this is a challenge, this is hard. They just do it. So when I was going through tough times, still go through tough times, I think back about that moment. So that's probably an important moment for me.
Very interesting, Wisam, that you said, about your child and, took her as an example. It's very interesting when you think about it, isn't it? This is something that we have all gone through, you know what I mean? And for some reason, along that journey, we lose that persistence in us, Probably it could be the world weighing on us, the responsibilities and things of that sort. So we try to find the easy route. But as children, we've always been persistent, you know what I mean? And that's very encouraging. It's a new perspective for me. So thank you so much for sharing that, Wisam. And Wisam, moving on to our next question. So moving on to a more somber note. So has the COVID situation affected IQ's operations? If yes, what have you done to mitigate its effect? If no, how were you able to ride the storm?
So we also had a lockdown like everywhere else. Fortunately for us, a lot of the projects we were working on that we had, they had to continue. I mentioned the stadiums, the airport, etc. And just about all our projects continued as normal, which was great. Fortunately for us, everyone was working. The problem we had is we couldn't find enough people to work on it. The other very big problem we had was cash flow, because the banks, in essence, almost shut down. We did financing for the projects, like any business, we had new projects, bonds, etc. It was a nightmare. It still is ongoing now. Price of oil crashed and it went up, and it's a roller coaster now, and no one knows the future. So budgets are in turmoil, but we still have the work on hand. But it was nice to come in to work. The country was empty for us, with the exception because of the work. We were allowed to come into the office. Things were less hectic. And then at one point we had to work from home. So it was in April, May. The weather was nice. Kids were at home. We're by the water. So it was a very nice environment to work in. It was relaxed. Gave you a chance to step back and appreciate a little bit life. So a lot of pros, a lot of cons along with it. I mean, I haven't been able to travel. I used to do a lot of traveling. It's nice not to have to travel. At the same time, I got to get out of here just for a week. Got to travel somewhere. So there's pluses and pros and cons. Fortunately, we're not in hospitality business or retail or anything that got hit really hard. Our project at the airport is still an airport expansion, has to go on. We got to get ready for FIFA. So we have been fortunate during the lockdown. Just have to weather the cash crunch we're going through.
Thank you so much, Wisam, for sharing that. And Wisam, moving on to our next question. So moving forward, what are your plans for IQ?
We need to, so what we're doing now, we're continuing with our ongoing projects. We have a current line of business. We're diversifying more into more high-tech and technology-based business inside and outside of Qatar. We've been successful so far for the construction industry, but it's dangerous to be stuck with just one potential line of business that can completely dependent on that can falter. And we're also in one small geographic area. So we've launched other companies like an airport management platform called Emma and smartphone for kids called Monkey. We are diversifying out to different lines in and outside of.
Excellent, Wisam. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Wisam, moving on to our last question. So what are the life and business lessons that you would like to share with someone who's planning to start a business in Qatar?
From a personal perspective, when we had a house in San Francisco in the Berkeley Hills with nice cars, a nice view. You're living like a yuppie lifestyle. Then we came here, and people are, of course, shocked when they hear you left San Francisco for Doha. But actually, we had a better time here than in San Francisco, especially with two small kids. It's very family oriented. It's a safe environment. My wife is French, a lot of French speakers here. Doha for a young family, I think is great. From a business perspective, it's still kind of like the Wild West here. So, if you're coming from a more structured area like the US and Europe, and get ready to come here and pull up your sleeves and do a lot of fighting and shouting. That's just how it's done here. The legal framework here isn't as structured as it could be, and it's very slow. People are a little more loose in the work that's done here. But there's a lot of opportunity. For sure, I could not have done what I did here anywhere else in the world. I can't imagine doing it anywhere else in the world. We're working on world-class hospitals, FIFA. I mean, who in the world can say they've worked in FIFA stadiums? We've worked on 3 here. No one, very few people. So, especially starting from nothing. It's not like we're a big, some huge conglomerate. From the airports, there's a lot of stuff we're able to do here that I could not have done anywhere else in the world. So I think it's a very important point. It's just people come to Qatar, they think it's a rich country. Don't be fooled by that. It's a business like anywhere else. You got to have value. You got to be lowest price. No one's going to give you anything. True, there's a lot of wealthy people here. Okay. But it doesn't mean the businesses are not well run. Doesn't mean the businesses are just going to give you money. There's still a high expectation here. So I think it's important for people that are planning to come here. There's a lot of opportunity. And just like anywhere else in the world, you got to have a business plan. You got to know people. You have to hustle. No one's going to give you anything because you think you're going to come here and change the way things are done. Probably 10,000 other people arrive the same day thinking the same way as you.
Excellent, Wisam, for sharing those insights on Qatar and the opportunities in Qatar. Wisam, I just appreciate the time that you've given us, and thank you so much for sharing those important points. Some things for me that stood out through the process of talking to you is basically emotional resilience, especially as an entrepreneur. It's so very important because your businesses could have highs and lows, but it's very important to see the bigger picture. You know what I mean? It's not always going to be high, it's not always going to be low. You have to iterate, you have to pivot, and be flexible enough to make use of the opportunities that comes your way. So that's an excellent point that you shared. Persistence, along the same line. And I think another thing that stood out for me is appreciate the journey. You know what I mean? Sometimes I think as people, we always think, we're going to be this big company one day and I'll relax when I reach that milestone. But I think, from what you're sharing, it's basically enjoy every moment of that process, every day, every achievement, celebrate it with your team, with your family, and be happy, along that process. So that's very, very positive and very inspired, very encouraging to know that your daughter, your child was actually helped you to understand the importance of being resilient, getting back up every time, and trying to make better use of the opportunities, or trying to probably put ourselves in a better position to actually take hold of opportunities. Because sometimes I think we expect the world to change, but when in fact it's actually we ourselves who have to actually change to the changing environments around us. So a lot of wonderful insights, Wisam. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I wish you the very best with IQ Qatar, and as you venture out into different verticals of businesses across the world. Wish you the very best, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you.